Hey guys, Mike for Sim Racing 604, and I've been fortunate throughout the years to review a bunch of different wheelbases, a bunch of amazing wheelbases, frankly. And something I always do when I'm reviewing a wheelbase is take the time to build a force feedback profile. A good force feedback profile for your wheelbase is kind of like an in-game car setup. Most of us know to do some level of setup to our cars in our favorite racing sims, from just dropping the fuel to the right level to fine-tuning the suspension, whatever it is. And I think you should do the same with your wheelbase. So it's one of my most requested videos ever is to share my settings. I don't actually like making these videos. I've had videos in the past do very well sharing my settings and doing force feedback guides into how to tune your force feedback. Some of them I've pulled previously, even very successful videos. The reason being is it tends to be quite polarizing. I think people get the wrong idea about force feedback profiles. I think people think that a force feedback profile is supposed to be sort of a panacea. I share my settings, you implement those settings, and automatically everything feels great to you. This is not the case. Again, going back to the analogy of a car setup in your favorite racing sim, you've probably gone online, watched a video of somebody setting some incredible hot lap time, and they've shared their their car setup. You've copied this down, implemented it into your favorite sim, and how does it feel? Probably not great. Does it make it a bad setup? No, not at all. What it does is it means that that person has customized it to what they like to feel. And that is the same with your force feedback profile for your wheelbase. So don't expect these settings that I'm going to share with you today to automatically be everything you were searching for. You're going to have to do at least some fine tuning, or maybe you will disagree with me completely. And this has been historically what has happened with my force feedback tuning videos is people have gone on there and some percentage of people say, Mike, this is amazing, this saved Assetto Corsa for me, whatever, and I'm happy for those people, of course, but also there's some percentage of people who go on and say, you completely ruined this for me. So this is why I don't like to do these videos, because I think people sort of expect to take them at face value and for it to be amazing. No, for some of you, for some small percentage, it is going to be amazing. For most of you, you will have to do some level of tuning to get it to your liking, and for some of you, you're going to have to scrap everything I've said and build it from scratch. But if you're looking for sort of a jumping off point or a baseline, I'm going to share my settings for Assetto Corsa, Automobilista 2, and also Assetto Corsa Competizione. So again, getting you on your way. Today's wheel is going to be the Moza Racing R5. This is one of my most requested videos. Some wheelbases I test feel really, really good out of the box. Logitech, Thrustmaster, those are excellent feeling force feedback wheels right out of the box. You don't have to do much except tune the strength. But with the Moza Racing, I don't like their default profiles generally, so there's usually quite a bit of tuning that needs to be done in order to get it to my liking. So for those of you who own the R5, this should hopefully help you. If you don't own the R5 and you've come here to learn more about force feedback in general, that's great. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get into sort of how I go through step by step building a force feedback profile. So whatever your wheel is, you should be able to apply this and hopefully get yourself a better force feedback setting. The reason for the timing of this video, I was kind of, I wouldn't say vindicated, but I was reassured. If you watch Daniel Murad's channel, I think he's got a phenomenal sim racing channel, and he did a force feedback profile video about 3 months ago, and he and I are generally in alignment with how something should feel. So it's a pro racing driver saying this is how I set it up, and again, it kind of falls in line with what I do, so it kind of reassured me that I'm somewhat on the right path. But again, please don't take this as gospel. Please don't take this as these settings are going to feel perfect for you. This is just perhaps a starting base for you, or for some of you it might work great. So we'll see what happens with that. So a few sort of caveats before we start. Number one, please take a backup. Please, please, please take a backup. I have had people in the past who've tried my settings and said, Mike, this totally ruined it for me, and they've emailed me and said, I need you to be tech support for me and walk me through how to get my settings back. I don't want that. So please take a backup, at least write down your settings, so that if you hate what I've done with my force feedback, yeah, you can just go back to your old settings and no worries there. Generally, you can default any force feedback profile to factory settings anyway, but good idea to take a backup just in case. The second thing is I want to just restate, I told you this is not some panacea, this is not going to feel fantastic for everyone, but I want to also stipulate that it very much matters what you're driving. So it's going to depend on the car, it's going to depend on the wheel you have attached. In this case, I have the 12-inch round attached to my Moza R5, but it's also depending on the sim, obviously. Depends most importantly on you, what you like to feel. It depends, you know, on how bumpy the track is, how much curb you generally take when you drive, and things like that. So there's a bunch of different factors. So you know, we're going to be establishing a baseline today, but you're going to have to go up or down on a few settings depending on the track. So again, I'm going to be doing Assetto Corsa Automobilista 2 and Assetto Corsa Competizione with the Moza Racing R5, and I'll walk you through basically what my settings are, what I'm feeling in the wheel, and you can adjust in kind, and sort of the step-by-step of how I build it I'll get into shortly, and then you can apply this to any wheelbase you wish. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through my 5 steps for setting up a force feedback profile. The first thing that's important to do, by the way, did you take a backup yet? I hope you did. The first thing I like to do is choose whatever sim, car, and track that I want to drive with. In this particular case, I'm going to be rocking a GT3 car at Monza in Assetto Corsa. Are you stuck with that forever? Of course not. You can choose to do whatever you want, but what I would say is when you're tuning a force feedback profile, stick with one car, one track, one sim for now, because what happens is if you go in and create a profile, let's say for a modern formula car with incredibly stiff suspension at you know, some track that's very smooth, and then you go back and you know, adjust things and have some, you know, really rough track like a airport circuit or Sebring or something like that, and then change the car from an ultra stiff formula car to some you know, road car with buttery soft suspension. It's going to be all over the map. Okay, so what I would say is just for now, stick with one car, one track, one sim, and tune that, and then you can save that as one profile. And then if you do go with that buttery soft passenger car at some well, let's go the opposite, at some buttery soft suspension car at some ultra smooth track, and want to create a profile for that, you can do so. But what I would say is while you're tuning a single profile, your first profile at least, stick with one car, one track, one sim. The second thing I like to do is once I've chosen my car, track, and sim, is I like to tune the strength. So in this case, you can see here in the Moza Pithouse software, we have the game force feedback intensity set to 100%. That lines up with the maximum output torque. So that's 100%, meaning we're using the full strength available from the motor. If we jump over here to the Assetto Corsa Content Manager, as you can see, I've got the gain set to 75%. So I like to keep things high in the global settings and lower in the in-game settings. So depending on the game, it's going to vary quite a bit. In this case, in the Assetto Corsa, I keep it pretty high. In most sims, it's down closer to like 55-60%. But yeah, that's what I like to do, is keep it high in the global settings and turn it down in game. Now, there's a safety concern here. So with the Moza Racing R5, especially with this round wheel, there's not much safety concern, okay? If I hit a bump and I have this at full strength and this wheel threatens to rip out of my hands, it's probably nothing's going to happen because, you know, it'll just slip right through my hands and it's easy for me to take my hand away to a safe zone. There's no hard edges. But I will say I have heard stories of people who have been injured by their wheel. I have had my own come back on me like 2 or 3 times in many thousands of hours of racing, so it's not a big consideration for me. But if you are concerned about safety, if you're rocking something with like 20, 25, 30 Newton meters of torque, and especially with a formula wheel, you know, that's flat across the top, if you hit a bump and that wheel with that 20, 30 Newton meters of torque comes around and hits your hand, that's going to really hurt. Again, I have had it happen and it does hurt. People have broken bones with that. So the way to get around that is to turn the maximum output in the global software down, and then probably keep your in-game settings a little bit higher to compensate for that. I personally don't do that. I like to have, even with my higher output motors, I like to have the global settings kept high and the in-game settings slightly lower. That's just a personal preference. I have chosen to sort of accept that safety risk, and to date, it has not come back to bite me, so I'm good. But again, if you're concerned about the safety, if you're concerned about that wheel ripping out of your hand in the case of, you get bumped by somebody, or whatever other event in your racing sim that would cause a spike event in your force feedback, then please just turn down your global settings for your strength and compensate for it in your software. But that is step 2, is I like to set my strength. Now, the next one we're lucky with the Pit House software. It's an excellent piece of software in my opinion. So step 3 is the force feedback equalizer. I don't know, are these my settings? Let me just quickly boot up my Assetto Corsa settings here. So as you can see with my force feedback equalizer here, and I will share all these settings with you on screen, don't worry. With these settings, I've kind of tuned to my liking. So there's a bit more in terms of body bumps and curbing. I've got, quite a difference there, but I think it feels really good. If you're somebody that for whatever reason loves to feel ABS vibration and, getting into the realm of curbs at high speeds, you can do that if you wish. But I personally am not a fan of that. Where was that setting? Anyway, okay. You can tune it how you like. I personally like to feel a bit of the road. I don't like to feel numbness when I'm driving in a straight line. It's going to vary depending on the car you drive, but probably when you drive your passenger car with its soft suspension and road tires, you can probably feel something, just a slight vibration to tell you that you are driving through your wheel. I would expect this to be more in a racing car because you have that stiffer suspension that's translating more of those, tiny bumps and, your slick tires, which has so much contact with the road. So I'd expect it to be more. However much you want is up to you, of course, but I like to feel just a little something just to know my force feedback is on and the car feels kind of in contact with the road. So just a very, very slight vibration is what I like to feel when I'm kind of driving in a straight line. When I'm going around a corner, I do like to feel those curbs, especially exit curbs as the speed is increasing. It tells me I hit my mark. You would expect to feel something like that depending on the course. Of course, the curbing is going to be, strong vibrations or subtle vibrations, but I do like to feel something in the curbing on exit. Understeer is a big thing for me. I think Assetto Corsa does an excellent job, possibly the best of any racing sim I've tried, in telling you, when you crank the wheel and you're understeering and those front tires are kind of skipping across the road surface. I like to feel that as well. So those are things I'm going to tune for. So I'm going to have to go in game and try it and see, okay, that's too much curb, go back to the Moza software or go back to whatever software you're using and tune out a bit of that curbing. Sometimes it's called FX, sometimes it's called depending on your software, there's 100 things it could be called, but generally there is some setting that allows you to feel more of the road surface, and sometimes you have tuning for sand and grass and things like that, so you can tune that to your liking. But that's kind of step 3, is sort of those what I would consider secondary effects. So once you've got strength set and you can move on to the details like curbing and road surface and things like that and do that tuning. And then step 4 to me is damping. So if we go back into, I think it's in advanced here, maybe. There we go. So basic settings. So this wheel damper. So if you turn that off, you're going to have very pronounced effects. And especially when you get into higher output motors, some of those effects that you feel, like particularly in the case of curbing or something like that, is going to be very, very sharp, very staccato, you might say. And that's not necessarily what you're going for, or that's not necessarily what I like to feel anyway, because when you're driving a car, there's so many mechanical components between that tire hitting the curb and your wheel that it does get dampened. There are mechanical systems in there that make that force less sharp. So you can add damper. I like to keep it, as you can see, on 0 to 100. I keep it at 5. So I like to keep mine very, very low. Some people might like it more, but for me, I keep that damper low, and just gives a bit more of a natural effect. yeah, just a little bit of damper, I think, goes a long way in terms of making things feel a bit more real. So again, keep it low. For me, I like to keep it low, but perhaps in your case, you like to feel a bit more of a damper effect on your force feedback. And then step 5, perhaps the most important setting, is go back and revisit it. Don't expect that your first pass, your second pass, your 10th pass is going to be correct. In fact, you might get it dialed in perfect today, come back, sit at your rig tomorrow and go, what was I thinking here? It seems to vary, for me at least, by day. I think I got it perfect. I go back, I visit it and go, this still isn't right. So don't expect this to be a finished piece. Just allow yourself the freedom to go back and give yourself the expectation that you're not going to get this ever correct. It's not finished. It's a work in progress, and you're going to have it very, very close to perfect and, well tuned within reason. But you are going to have to revisit it from time to time to adjust things. And maybe you're trying a new track, maybe you're trying a new car. And then you have to sort of compensate for that by adding or removing effects, maybe more damper or less damper. The strength, I think, should pretty much be set early on, but yeah, you will be able to adjust this to your liking. So that's my 5 steps for setting a force feedback profile. And now we're going to jump into game, and I'll share my settings on screen and talk a little bit about what I'm feeling in the title. Okay, so we're starting off here in Assetto Corsa as I smack a wall on my way out the pit box. So again, what am I looking for here in a force feedback profile? Give myself a bit of sound so I can actually hear my engine and know when to shift. A little bit, just these little subtle vibrations in the wheel as I'm coming down the start-finish straight here, and then I go over this curb. I can feel that curb very clearly. It tells me I've hit my mark because, of course, I can't see. I can feel that curb, but I can't actually see it. Is my wheel on that? And, a lot of us would know just sort of by understanding the dimensions of the car whether or not you're on the curb. But for me, force feedback functions as, another source of input. You can't actually feel anything through the butt of your seat unless you're, rocking a butt kicker or some sort of motion system, but most of us aren't. So it's good to feel that. And again, a little bit of vibration. That vibration increases as the speed increases. And have I hit these curbs? I missed that first one, but I definitely got that second. And then on the exit, I'm riding this curb here, so I can feel that just fine. So I really like these settings that you're seeing on your screen now. To me, this is a good force feedback profile. The strength is perfect. I'm not, with this particular wheel at least, I'm not at all having to work hard, to turn the wheel. Everything's flowing nice and easily. I could drive like this for hours and not feel tired, but at the same time, it's not so soft that I'm not feeling anything through the wheel. I know, when I'm going through a high-speed corner like this Ascari chicane, and I, turn the wheel in there, it's I went into understeer there. You could probably hear it, but I could also feel it through my wheel. But we're coming up to Parabolica, and as I go around that corner, I'll be able to feel kind of the outside tires driving into the road surface, and that sense of speed is evident through the force feedback profile, if that makes sense. Right now I'm in brutal understeer, but there we go. We got our grip back. And there's a bit more resistance on that wheel, and you can't really see it here because Monza is a very, well-maintained track, and there's not a lot of bumps. But when I go over a bumpy road surface, the wheel's going to nicely center itself, and I'll kind of feel the car being tossed about a bit, and you'll be able to feel that through the wheel. So I'm really, really happy with these force feedback settings. And again, this is something I could drive with for hours on end, not feel tired, but all the while being, well-informed of sort of the location of my tires relative to the track surface. So yeah, these are settings I'm very, very happy with in Assetto Corsa, and seems to accomplish everything I look for in a force feedback profile. Okay, so time now for Automobilista 2, and this is a very similar profile in terms of strength to what I had in Assetto Corsa. So if you weren't a fan of the first, then you probably won't be a fan of this, or vice versa. If you did like my settings for Assetto Corsa, you'll probably also like these settings. So I'm using the Formula Inter here at Interlagos. I just now connected, the inter and inter. Yeah, so similar thing here. The reason I chose the Formula Inter is because it's sort of indicative of what we can expect from Automobilista 2 in the future, whereas Assetto Corsa is very much a complete sim. Automobilista 2 is a work in progress. We're seeing regular updates for it, and it's expected that when this moves to version 1.5, there will be some pretty significant physics changes, and these Formula Inters are already capturing those to the best of my knowledge. So hopefully this profile has a bit of staying power. So same thing, I'm feeling just these subtle vibrations as those tires roll across the road surface, nothing strong. And then I go around the corner here, and I'll try and clip a lot of curb and see if I can feel that. And I felt the bump there as I went over the end of the curb into the grass. Lots of outside curb feel there. Lots of, actually that one's kind of smooth, perhaps it's the curb surface itself, but this one, yeah, very pronounced. Might even be able to see that from that camera above me. But yeah, really nice profile here. I'm happy with this one. It's very similar, as I said, to Assetto Corsa. One of the biggest differences being that what happens when I go into understeer, so I don't know that I'll have a chance anytime soon, maybe if I crank the wheel a bit. But instead of getting that chattering of the tire surface scrubbing across the, of the tire scrubbing across the road surface, what you have in Automobilista 2 is just sort of a numbness. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate about who's got the best force feedback profile, but just so you know, that's quite pronounced in my force feedback profile for Assetto Corsa, but you won't be able to feel it here in Automobilista 2. Again, it's more of just a general numbness, because I can feel the tire scrubbing across the road surface right now, rolling along the road surface, I should say, but coming into turn 1 here, I will end up going to understeer. I'm going to deliberately slam on the brakes and give it too much steering input. And yeah, it just kind of gets numb when I go. I mean, obviously in that case I did a full spin, but let's see if I can get going straight again here. And then if I actually, not this left-hander, but the subsequent left-hander should be a good example of this. If I can induce a bit of understeer throughout the corner, it should feel numb to me, and I know you guys probably don't care because you can't feel what I'm feeling, but just trust me, I'm feeling it. So anyway, go in here, and there we go. You can hear it there, and then what I feel through the wheel is just kind of a numbness. Again, not that chattering effect that you get with Assetto Corsa. There is some of that in Automobilista 2, but not nearly as much. But generally, very much in line with what I like in a force feedback profile, and apparently I can't drive today. So nice and easy. Again, this is something I want to be able to live with for a long time. If I'm running a full-length race or even an endurance race in AMS2, I don't want to have to feel that I'm, cranking, working so hard, burning extra calories just to turn the wheel. I mean, most of these cars you'll drive in modern simulators have power steering anyway, so there's no point in making it super strong, and this one isn't. There's just enough sort of resistance there that I can feel it, and the settings you're seeing on your screen, to me, work really well for AMS2. Alright, one more sim to go. Alright, so a final force feedback profile that I'll share in this video. This is, of course, Assetto Corsa Competizione, and we're here at the Nürburgring GP on board the latest Lambo. Is it the Evo 2? The Huracan GT3 Evo 2? So yeah, similar in nature. This one feels different than Assetto Corsa or AMS2. I wasn't able to get it as aligned with Assetto Corsa as I would have liked. The curbs here to me are just far more pronounced. There's a lot going on. They're quite noisy. Even when I get the sort of let's say the amplitude right, the frequency seems just so much more dramatic here in ACC, but I think generally if you're happy with my Assetto Corsa settings or in AMS2 settings, or if you've sort of compensated for my settings by saying, hey, you don't like your strength as high as me, or I like to feel a bit more curb or a bit less curb or more road surface, blah blah blah, then probably the same sort of theory would apply to this setting. I've gone for kind of the same output here. There's a lot more road noise in this one, and I've tried tuning it down a bit, but it tends to go sort of off a cliff, like if I tune it down too much. So I'm sure you can kind of hear it in my words and my tone that I don't love this force feedback profile as much as I do for my Assetto Corsa and AMS2 settings, but I still think I'm pretty close here. I can certainly live with this, but it's still not quite there. I just got to get that road feel a little bit down, and I got to get the curbs to be a bit more subtle. So like you, this is very much an ongoing thing for me in tuning these settings, and you know, I like this more with the Porsche than I do with the Lambo. So yeah, it's gonna very much depend on the car for me, but I will need to tune that out. But yeah, broadly speaking, the settings you're seeing on your screen here are my ACC settings, so I think it should be pretty close for you. And again, maybe you're rocking with your R5 a different wheel. Maybe you've got the GS wheel or the FSR wheel or something like that, more sort of GT3 appropriate than this 12-inch round, so maybe it feels different for you. But yeah, this is my ACC settings. So I know there will be comments, you know, can you do iRacing next? Can you do F123 next? And I'm considering it. I'm considering doing other wheels, but hopefully the sort of principles I've gone through in this video apply to you, and you can, you know, build yourself your own profile using the 5 steps I outlined. And yeah, maybe the settings that I've shared toward the back half of this video are sort of, you know, giving you targets and what you should perhaps be feeling or trying to feel, or a better understanding of what you personally like, most importantly. So hopefully you can build those profiles yourself, but I am considering doing this for other wheels. We'll see how this video does. If 10 people watch this, then I'll scrap it. If, you know, it's one of my more popular ones, then I'll do it for other wheelbases. But that's it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this force feedback guide was helpful. Again, thank you to Daniel Murad for kind of vindicating me, giving me the confidence to do this video, and hopefully the comments aren't too mean. All right, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.